Amateur Radio Club, the best in town. From dawn till dusk, we're up in the sky, talking on repeaters, let our voices fly. With every static crackle, we share a good tale. Chasing the signals, we just can't fail. We all have a story to tell, from city lights to country wells. It's what we thrive for, the bond we share. Our laughter and voices fill the night air.
All right. So this presentation is a very basic overview of Meshtastic. There's nothing I'm going to talk about today that's not on meshtastic.org. Anybody who's already been playing with it probably knows everything in here already. This is very, very high level basics. So, this is pretty much straight from their website. Meshtastic utilizes LoRa, which is a format of 915 megahertz radio. Well, 915 in the US, it's 856 in Europe. It's a long range, low power radio protocol. And the nice thing about Meshtastic in this particular protocol is it's unlicensed. So you don't have to have a ham radio license to use it. The application for Meshtastic is designed to pair a single node to a single phone. And I have discovered if you trick it into pairing to multiple devices, you will mess it up. Don't do that. So I really like this picture. It's off the meshtastic.org website. This is a great explanation because a lot of people will see you messaging with Meshtastic and they go, well, we'll just use any number of messaging apps on your phone. Why do you need Meshtastic? Well, what Meshtastic is doing is it is creating a radio mesh in the 915 megahertz space that is completely independent of the cell phone towers or the internet. And that's where a node like my little T-Deck here is a fantastic example, because this guy does not use a cell phone, period, full stop. The cell phone in the app is really just to give you an interface. These are like your handy talkies. These are like, well, not really an HF rig, but these are like an independent radio, and your cell phone is just an interface. That's all. So the little T-Deck here is cool because it actually won't pair to a phone. If I want to change the deep settings in this, I have to use a USB cable, because to do the interface on here, it kills the Bluetooth. So, but this image is great because this shows you exactly how it works. Your little nodes, these things will have a range of a mile, a couple miles, depending on your antenna, elevation, how much crap's in the way. So what they do is they repeat their messages. So I send a message on my T-Deck, and maybe I'm targeting at Travis, and I can't get directly to Travis. He's too far away. But there's two other nodes in distance of both of us. Well, my message will go to that node in between. Maybe it's Eric's. I'm just picking on random people in the crowd. And then Eric's node will retransmit it. And then Travis's node can pick it up, and he can reply back and forth through the mesh. Now, the mesh tries to be a little bit smarter about this in that there's different settings for your nodes. We'll get into that. And if one node hears another node repeat the same packet, it typically won't repeat it. For the most part, these things are not as bulletproof as we'd like. The coding on them, they're running on microcontrollers. Occasionally they'll mess up and repeat things. I've had instances, especially where I've had lots of nodes running in my house testing things, where I've gotten the same message over and over and over again. So it does happen. If you get routing loops and things like that, it can happen. And then if you get into where people have put up routers or repeaters, which are nodes with a different kind of software setting, there's no hardware difference. Yeah, we're building them up a little differently. This is a solar node I've put together. We've got some great examples out there that are better than mine. But, it's the exact same radio that's in one of the little nodes. I've just got a, 5 dB gain antenna on it and a solar panel so that you can put the thing up on a pole. The only difference really between your pocket node or the TDEC or a node in your car and the repeater is that you're giving a repeater or a router a better advantage on usually its height. We also discovered there's amplifiers for the thing, so you might put an amplifier on it as well. So, but anyways, this is great because it shows that the message is going through the LoRa network and you're just using Bluetooth to get in and out of it, or USB or Wi-Fi to a laptop. So with Meshtastic, there are mesh presets. These are specific sets of message timing and frequency settings in the radio. And if you go into licensed mode, you say, I'm a ham radio operator, I've got a license, it'll actually open it up and you can put your own together. But they've got about 8 or 12 presets in there. Long fast being our default preset, and that's typically what I'm going to recommend we leave them on. And the reason I'm recommending long fast is purely because it is the default, not because it's necessarily the best for our area. Part of what I'm hoping we do is that we leave enough of our mesh as the default of what it is, that if somebody goes online, buys one of these tracker cards, and turns it on, they show up on our mesh and we can start saying, hi, you should be getting into radio with us and join the club. So, because there's a lot of interest in Meshtastic and there's only going to be more, especially coming out of, how popular it gets online and the internet. So we can use different presets to get better settings. The long short is better if you have lots of nodes in an area. The slow, short fast, if you have a lot of nodes and you're not trying to cover a lot of distance. You can do long slow if you're trying to get a lot of distance. And then there's a long very slow that if you're trying to make very far throws with it. Again, though, if you're going to be using these kind of mesh settings, you're now no longer in the default, and everybody in the mesh needs to be on the same settings, because that is the other thing. It's like changing that frequency dial on your radio, or I guess a better analogy would be, it's like trying to talk to somebody on single sideband using FM. You might hear noise. It's not going to work if you're not in the same radio settings. Device roles. We were talking about this just a second ago. The default role for any device is a client. What clients do, they are meant for sending and receiving messages, and they will repeat messages they hear from other nodes. That is the default setting. It's a typically good setting. For the most part, for what we're doing, unless you are specifically putting something up on a pole to be a repeater or a router, there's probably not a good reason to take it out of client. There's a variation on client called client mute. Now, there is a reason to use this. Client mute is we will send and receive messages to the mesh. It will send telemetry to the mesh. It will not repeat messages it hears from other nodes. The reason you might want to use this is like I have a node in my attic at home. If I want to set up another node at home that I'm going to use for maybe an automation or hook up to a computer or just something that's going to sit on the couch so I can message from the couch, like if I'm going to leave that TDEC sitting on the couch and never actually take it with me anywhere, I might put it in client mute because my attic node is going to handle repeating all the traffic and I don't need my secondary node adding extra noise to the mesh. Right now, our mesh isn't super busy because it's still spread out and we're still trying to get everybody connected up. Once we get enough nodes out there, you might actually have enough telemetry packets going around that having extra nodes repeating creates more mess than it helps. Router and repeater nodes. Now, the main difference between the two is that routers will show up in your node list. Repeaters will not. Other than that, the two are fairly similar. They both will attempt to interrupt the packet order. So they will repeat first and then check with other nodes to see if the thing's been transmitted. Whereas your client node will listen for a bit before it repeats a message to make sure somebody else hasn't already repeated it. The thing is, with that, because your client nodes will go, oh, somebody else already retransmitted that if a router or a repeater did it. That router or repeater, especially if they're not set up well, if you take one of those little stubby antennas that came with the nodes and set that, oh, that's my repeater, and then just duct tape it to the side of your house on a rain gutter or something, you're going to create a scenario where you're consuming hops, preventing other nodes from retransmitting it and keeping that message from going very far. In fact, if you were wanting to be a jerk, you could attack the network by setting a bunch of nodes up as repeaters and setting them up so that they can't reach very far. And you would actually create a dead space in the network where everybody's messages would just consume all of their hops, which I'll explain in a minute, and not be able to actually make traffic. So if you are going to put something in router or repeater, we need to work together as a group of where we're going to put these things. Because if you have too many close together, you can consume all of the hops and not cover a lot of distance. If you have them misconfigured, you can really cause problems. So really, you want them spread out. You want them high up so that they can cover a larger area. And if you're going to put up a repeater or a router, we probably ought to work together as a group, and our group's IO is a great place for that, to kind of ensure that the coverage we're giving the area is appropriate. If somebody else already has a repeater up and you're right under them, you probably don't need to put another repeater up. All you're going to do is just make an area where you're going to immediately consume 2 hops instead of 1. Go for it.
Okay.
Go for it. This is a group activity.
I've been studying this a lot, and routers and repeaters, just don't do it for the most part, because a lot of people have discovered that, and I did too, through trial and error, that if you put a solar node on top of your house, make it a router, and that's great for you, because the nodes inside your house will go through that and get broadcast out from a better antenna than it would if it went just through a node in your house, right? If it was a repeated, especially if you have multiple nodes that are on in your house, your message traffic will start bouncing around inside your house, and then it'll leave your house through probably a low power node. And so if you let it go through a router on your roof with a higher gain antenna or whatever, then it can get out to the mesh better. All right, and same thing receiving traffic. You want to receive your traffic through that node up on top of your house with a higher gain antenna, and then filter that down to the nodes in your house. So a lot of people figured that out, and they made these rooftop nodes routers. And I did the same thing when I was ignorant. But what I've learned since then is that I'm up on top of a hill, and I can see forever to the northeast and east, about maybe a 60-degree arc. And so all across the countryside, those nodes can see my router on top of my roof, and they see it when I repeat stuff. Okay, and so what was happening is traffic from out in that direction would get repeated by my router and go blasting into the side of a bunch of hills for the other 300 degrees around me. And my node was just basically hijacking traffic and blasting it into the side of a bunch of hills, okay, which is a big disservice to the net. So to address this, what they've done is if in the alpha version of the firmware, they have a new configuration called client_base. And what that does is it acts like a router just for the nodes that you have saved as favorites. So therefore, you get the benefit of all the stuff in your house being funneled through the antenna you want it to go in and out through, and you're not messing the whole net up. And actually, this is turning into such a big problem that now they're talking about removing the ability of people to configure routers or repeaters unless you have administrative permission from, I don't know who the authority is.
Yeah, how does that work?
but they're actually strongly considering doing that in the software so that people just can't do that anymore, can't make repeaters and routers.
Well, and that goes back to what I was talking about with client mute, where if you're going to have nodes in your house and then you have a big one up in your attic, you set the attic node or your roof node to be your client node, and then everything in the house to be client mute. That way you're not.
Yes.
That's a way to get that.
And that's how all of mine are configured now is as clients, or what I've started doing is I only keep one on at a time in my house, and it's this one all the time because I want people to be able to contact me on this one. So the other ones I have in my house, I keep off all the time. So anyway, now mine are all client. Client is the way to go, and there will be an improvement. If you're willing to chance it, I haven't been yet, to chance the alpha version of the firmware. You can try that client base. I definitely saw a performance improvement when I turned the one on my roof into router mode, but it's not the right thing to do. So it's in client now. So I did read on, and it's not very is the answer. Yeah.
Well, it probably depends on your hardware too. If you've got some of the more common hardware like the Whiz blocks or the Heltex, the ones that most people are using, those are probably going to be a little bit more stable than some of the newer hardware that's been coming out. You know, our little tracker cards, everybody loves them, but they're still fairly new. So I don't know that I would put alpha on something like that.
What I read is that it's not just on the hardware, but there are issues with the alpha version in terms of how it handles traffic that is really quirky, and sometimes it doesn't work so well. So I don't want to use alpha myself yet, but hopefully in a month or so. I asked Grok for a projection of when that might go to beta, and Grok said, well, based on the past, maybe a month or two. So I'm willing to wait a couple months, 2 or 3 months if I need to for that to come out. But I can't wait to try client base whenever that is in beta mode.
That's Keith's.
Okay.
So, but yeah, that's why your client role is important. And for the most part, I'm going to say leave it in client. If you're comfortable with what you're doing, maybe put it on client mute. But if you're going to do router or repeaters, that needs to be a kind of a more of a planned deployment of where we're going to put the things to try to ensure we don't have too many in one area, we don't break anything, we don't fire everybody's signal into the side of a mountain. And if you're wanting to play with something like one of these Yagis, it'd be really easy to pick up everybody's nodes and fire it the wrong way. So, you know, which I've never actually got that I've never actually used that Yagi. Well, I've used it once. I did a sweep with it, but it was before everybody was getting nodes up. So I don't know how well it actually works. Channels. Meshtastic, which I probably should have covered in the very beginning, is text only. You are sending text messages. No records, no audio, no picture, text messages. That's URLs and text. So anything you can code to text, you can send. 2 message types: direct messages between nodes and channels. Channels act as a broadcast or a group message. So when your primary default, anybody can join to that. You send a message to it. Everybody's node who hears it, their device is going to beep and say, hey, you got a message. You know, when we were all messing with it earlier, we all saw everybody's nodes going off. We also have, when I get to QR codes, we have a second node channel we're playing with of a W4 GGM that is encrypted. It's got a key. That key is in the QR code. So if you scan that code, you'll be able to add that channel to your device and message on it. We were primarily playing around with the encrypted channel because that way you could share precise locations. You can also do precise locations from node to node in direct messages on current firmware. That's the other thing I should mention because we were just talking about the alpha. Meshtastic is still very much under development. They are adding new features. So around 2.6, they added the idea of each client having its own public-private key pair. Well, that wasn't in the previous version. So if you have older nodes floating around that don't have that, it acts erratic when it sees that. I've seen messages on mine of some node just shared your public key. Well, that node was running 2.4 and didn't know what a public key was. So it just didn't know what to do with the data it got back. And because there are different nodes running different versions floating around, sometimes as you upgrade, we might start seeing weirdness, from different versions floating around. The device supports 8 channels. A channel is a number. We figured out the order is important. So it's a channel 1 through 8, or 0 through 7, a name, and a key. So my channel 1 W4 GGM with its key has to be the same as everybody else in it for to be able to send messages on that channel. Node to node, you just pick your node out of the list and send them a direct message, and that is sort of like an SMS. It is straight my radio to your radio. That is assuming there is a path of nodes between you and the person you're wanting to message. If you both are in range of each other, cool. It's a straight shot node to node. If there's 3 nodes in between you, well, you're going to consume all your hops, but you'll get that message across. So I haven't got to it yet, but a hop is essentially the number of times your packet is allowed to be repeated between nodes before the network will drop it as it didn't get where it was supposed to go. The default is 3. 3 is pretty good because 3 is actually 5. 3 is, okay, my device transmits at 3. It gets repeated 3 times, and then the receiving device gets it. So that hop length of 3 means it can hop between 3 devices after I've sent it, but before it's received. So the sending and the receiver would make 5 nodes in total. Am I explaining that well? Okay. So you can go up your hop count. I believe the maximum is 8. 7. Okay. I don't know. I mean, I don't know that our mesh is dense enough that 7 is necessary, but until we get enough nodes, that they might be worth playing with that hop count, putting it up to 5 or putting it up to 7. When you have a very dense mesh and lots of nodes on it, that high hop count means that you're potentially creating more traffic in the mesh, and you can actually saturate a mesh.
Think of that number as an exponent in terms of mesh traffic, right?
Yep.
Because it is exponential.
Yes. So the channels can be encrypted or unencrypted. If a channel is unencrypted, that means all of your text is sent in the clear. We're hams, we're used to that. But if it's encrypted, anybody watching, and if you haven't done it yet, you can go into the debug log on your radio settings and actually see the raw packets, the low raw packets. So if there's unencrypted channels in there, you'll see the text in those channels, even if you're not subscribed to them. If you've encrypted them, you'll obviously see garbage because it's encrypted. QR codes. So what they have done, because your settings do have to be that exact across nodes, is they've created this system for sharing your channel configurations called using a QR code. These things on the back end connect up to meshtastic.org, and it's just a set of settings that are being transmitted across the URL, basically. You can use this to share your low raw configuration, your channels, your keys. And if you can scan that off there, you probably have better luck off the laptop screen. This particular one will set your low raw to the default of long fast. It will set your primary to what should be the default, which is that short key AQ equal on the default channel. And it will add a W4 GGM channel with the pre-shared key. I would tell you what the key is, but it was auto-generated by the app, and it's very long, so I don't actually know it. So the only way to get it is the QR code. So this is what I'm going to recommend we do as a group, is we decide on our basic channels and settings that we want. We generate that QR code, and we put it somewhere accessible, whether that's the w4ggm.org website, groups.io, big billboard, I don't really care, but we need somewhere that we can share this out so that if you're doing Meshtastic in our club, in our area, this is your settings you want to use to join our mesh. And this is a suggestion. This was just one I did as adding that one channel and kind of getting everybody on the same settings. If we want to do something more complex, you can do QR codes that all they do is add a channel. You don't have to wipe out all the settings with it. When you go to share a QR code in the app, it's under settings. You can say, I just want to add a channel, or I want to wipe out all channels. So we need to be clear when we're sharing QR codes, is this one that's going to wipe your settings out and do these channels, or is this just adding a channel? Because I'll probably have a few for adding a channel for, like, if I don't know, I had the idea of hooking up one of these guys to like an AI client so you could ask it questions over the mesh just for fun, or of course, we saw some software before where somebody put together a bulletin board system where you could leave messages so that somebody could go check in with it and get them. So go for it, George.
Just to be really clear, this thing doesn't wipe out most of your settings.
Yeah, it's just your preset and your channels.
I just did it. It gave me the option to either replace it or add it.
Yeah.
And it'll alert you in terms of what settings it's changing to. So it's only a couple it was only a couple for me.
Hops. I've already explained hops, but this is a good picture of it. Simply, hops are how often your packet is going to get repeated by a node or by neighboring nodes. So this image is great. It shows here's my originating node. This phone is sending the message to this node. 3, 2, and 1 are all repeating it. They're all in your line. here's my target node. So that's whoever I'm trying to message or somebody I'm talking to on my channel, and their phone attached to that node. This doesn't have to be a phone. Go up.
So could theoretically then this getting too popular end up being a problem?
Yes.
Everybody on my street has a node. I couldn't come across town.
If everybody on your street has a node, it is possible that you won't be able to talk across town because all those nodes could consume hops. But typically, client mode, this is where we were talking about routers and repeaters, clients won't repeat messages that they see a neighboring node repeat. And they know that it's repeated because they can see that hop count was reduced. So they can tell. No, they will if they, so let's say node 2 and node 3 here are real close to each other. Node 3 repeats. Node 2 might go, oh, I just saw 3 repeat that. I'm not going to repeat that.
And it knows that based on just the GPS data in the.
It's the packet ID header. It's got an identifier in the packet header because I didn't explain this, but all of your Meshtastic data is formatted into a data packet, which if you know computer networking, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't, it's simply a formatted string of text that's compressed and put together for LoRaW. So each packet has a ID number in it, basically, and it's got a hop count. So node 2 might go, oh, I just saw the originating message, and then I saw node 3 repeat it. So node 2 should say, well, I'm not going to repeat it because node 3 just did. So that's assuming node 1 is in range to hear it for this example. But
so the node would have to see the originating message and the repeated message, and then it won't re-repeat it.
Correct. Well, yes. Yeah, basically, it doesn't want to see the same packet over and over and over again. It's not perfect. I have seen it mess up. What's up?
I was going to ask, and I might be right on this. On the hop set, that's based on the device, right?
Yes.
Is the packets that you send from the originating device that is what
Right. It's the originator.
Okay.
So if I go in on my settings and say, this is me, and I go in here and I say, well, my maximum is 7 hops. Well, it'll make it through this. But let's say George, trying to be careful about overusing the mesh, says, I'm going to put it 2 hops. You won't make it. So, and these nodes, they don't care what my hops is. We don't care what their hops are. It's in the packet, right?
Let me add one other thing.
Please.
There are a whole bunch of different time slots too for hops. Okay, so like what a router or a repeater does, it takes the very first time slot to repeat or route. That's why at number 3 there is a router or a repeater. And all the clients around it say, okay, that's been repeated. I'm not going to touch it. And so it basically mutes them all. And if you configure your node to be client last, what it'll do is it'll wait for all the time slots. I think they're like 20 or something like that.
I don't remember. I'd have to read it again.
It'll wait till time slot number 20 to see if it hears a message be repeated. If it gets to 20 and it hasn't been repeated, then it'll repeat it. It's like the last resort.
So like my Yagi antenna over there, that client last might be a good profile for it because I don't want to fire off somebody's message in the wrong direction.
But you'll help the mesh if you see that it's just not going to be repeated if I don't do it.
Right. So
I think there's 20 time slots that can be repeated.
Mm-hmm.
That's how a node, like a client node, can wait and see if it's been repeated because it doesn't happen instantaneously. It's looking at each of these time slots and saying, has it been repeated yet? And when a client gets somewhere in the middle, it's like, okay, it hasn't been repeated. I'll go ahead and repeat it. And then client last will wait till the very last time slot. Late. That's it. Yeah. Sorry.
Router late.
My bad.
Is that?
yeah. So and I will say, I've got a slide on this at the end. Meshtastic.org, they have got this very well documented. So if you're curious on how it works, they've actually got some really good documentation on the website.
GPT and Grok and
Yeah, they know it too.
AI is also very helpful.
Yeah, they know it too.
Ask good questions.
So, and one last point on hops, because they're talking about hop count equals 0 here. What that is that's a counter in the packet. So when you broadcast it, it's at 3. So node 3 here picks up when it rebroadcasts it, it sets that hop, that it decrements it by 1. So whatever you started at, So if I start at 3, that's going to put it at 2. And then when node 2 here broadcasts it, it's going to put it at 1. So if it gets to 0 before it gets to the receiving node, they're not going to get it because the mesh is going to drop it. So that is exactly like IP packets if you're familiar with those, with a time to live setting.
Is there any way to set it so it's pulled from that message so it can notice?
Not that I'm aware of. Not that I'm aware of. That's where I was seeing some software that looked interesting about like a bulletin board system. I imagine, though, because I wasn't going to get into this in the presentation, they actually have some other software for hooking into these nodes, including a Python library. So it wouldn't be all that hard to write a piece of software that waits for a target node to come online, and when it sees them, go, oh, there you are, here's your message. So you could absolutely do that, but that would be a system written on top of Meshtastic. That's not part of the firmware itself. The map. One of the big things with Meshtastic is sharing your location. So pretty much it doesn't rely on any kind of radio finding or anything like that. It is relying on either a GPS module attached to your node or your GPS in your phone. And all it's doing is taking that location data, and by default, it's shifting it a bit in a random direction. And you can actually go in and set in your channels how much you want that to shift. So I think by default, it's almost like 0.9, it's like 0.9 of a mile.
No, it's actually 1.7 by default.
Oh, okay.
You can set it as low as 0.9. If you don't have encryption, that's as low as you can set it. And you can turn location off altogether.
Absolutely. Because it's, again, the location is purely dependent on the client device sending it. This also means that client devices could lie. You could absolutely go in your phone. Android, this is a little bit easier because it's built in as part of the testing. You could set your location to, I don't know, a volcano in Hawaii and send that out even though you're in Tennessee. And make it look.
Some people do that.
Yeah.
I've seen them.
Yeah.
One knows 8,000 miles away. You seen that?
Yeah, yeah. Well, more likely what that is somebody's got it set to, well, like what we were talking about before, where you had it, where we had them set to a static location because that's supposed to be your node at your house, and you don't want a GPS tag on it. But you then pick up the node and go somewhere with it, and now it's still set to a static location, so it's broadcasting my location's over here across town, even though you're standing next to them. So.
One George is talking about, it's got, he didn't get the minus 87.
Oh,
He did an 87.
Yeah.
Minus 87. It puts him in China.
So I tell you what, that's some great atmospheric ducting if they're really making a 900 megahertz transmission from China. Most nodes do not have a GPS attached to them by default. You can buy them aftermarket and solder them on and actually go in and set the pins in the configuration. That's what I did for my TDEC. I'd have to open it. You can see the lights from it in here if you look. There's a little GPS module up in the top of my TDEC here. And so this guy is broadcasting its location, but this guy is not. This guy does not have a GPS on it. It depends on whatever client device is hooked to it to give it its GPS. Same thing with your little, with our tracker cards. They're dependent on your phone giving it a GPS location. And again, it's purely what the client is sending out. So if you wanted to hard code a GPS location, and it supports that, it's called fixed. So also because of that variance and because Meshtastic knows it, I think that's what the circle on the map, like you were asking me about, Bill, where a node will sometimes have a circle around it. That's where it's figured out that the thing's got variability on, and it's kind of guessing at where it thinks it might be. Or that's the location it's got, but it knows it could be anywhere in that range. Ham mode. This is probably what's caused us the most problems because, of course, we look at these things and say, are you a licensed operator when you're setting up? You say, well, yes, I am, because you are. The problem is ham mode or licensed mode and unlicensed mode will not talk to each other. They are completely separate meshes. Licensed operator mode opens up a lot more options on tweaking your radio settings, and you can turn up your power up to 10 watts. Pretty sure that's what it says on the website, because that's what I was looking at when I put the slide together. By default, your little nodes that we have, these little tracker cards, your little health techs, these things I think at most will put out half a watt. and maybe more, maybe less, but depends on the hardware. So because most of the stock radios aren't anywhere near your 10 watt, and because by default you can't talk to somebody who's in unlicensed mode, I'm recommending we leave all of ours in unlicensed mode, so that if anybody just buys one of these tracker cards or a Heltec node or sees a YouTube video and says, well, I want to play with that, when they hook the thing up and they see an existing mesh and they can talk to people, that's a way to bring them into the group. Absolutely. Yeah. Or because otherwise, if it's in ham mode, everybody in the club obviously can scan a QR code and get in our mesh and talk with each other. But as we're hams, we've got like 20 other ways to do that. So I don't know that Meshtastic is providing us any value if we only use it in licensed mode. Go for it.
I would play with Meshtastic long before I got it.
Sure. It's a fun toy.
I did this after the fact.
Yeah. But I mean, it's a great gateway to it too, because now it's like, okay, how does this work? And yeah. And if you turned on your mesh and there's already an existing active mesh of people talking, and a lot of them are radio people, it's a way of bringing people in and getting more interest in the club as well. And as far as I understand it, they won't even repeat for each other. They won't, like, if I've got, as long as your nodes are on the same radio setting, so long fast, that preset we were talking about, even if you don't have the same channels as another node, and that node isn't trying to mess with you or send a message to you, you will still repeat for it. In ham mode, you will only repeat for other radios in ham mode, and the same thing for non-ham mode. So for the time being, I'm recommending we leave ham mode off, which I know for us is weird, because that first question, are you licensed? You say, well, of course I am, and give it your license, but it sets you up differently. Excuse me. Flashing a device. If you haven't done this yet, this is actually very simple. It looks complicated because they call it flashing a device, and traditionally you had to download odd software, or something like AVR Dude or the Arduino software, and put it into a special mode and flash it. Meshtastic has made this really easy. You go to the flasher.meshtastic.org website, and you either do it in Chrome, Edge, or Brave. And so far as I can tell, Safari and Firefox do not work. And that is just, they do not support, I think it's called Web Serial. So line of sight is paramount with these radios. Outside, clear of obstruction, and as much height as you can give it. The little small 2-inch antennas that come with these things are effectively a dummy load. They'll let you turn the radio on without blowing them up. You're not getting half of a mile on the things. And I know I gave out a bunch of nodes with those on them because that's what they came with. You really need a better antenna on them. Meshtastic.org has some links to known good and tested antennas. There are a lot of crappy ones out there. There are a lot of mislabeled ones out there, where they'll take a Wi-Fi antenna and say, this is this will work for whatever, and label it for Meshtastic. Your better bet is to look for antennas that actually say 915 megahertz, not Meshtastic, especially because in Europe, Meshtastic uses 850 megahertz. So generally, like Alpha actually says it's a 915 megahertz antenna, and that seems to be the one that's on most of our solar nodes out here. This guy is left over from a different low-raw project that I was doing, which was on, I forget the name of it now. It was a cryptocurrency thing. And it works. It works great. And it's probably going back in my attic, because the one I have up in there is performing not as well as this guy did. But this guy was advertised for something completely different. This is a Yagi. And somebody helpfully put a sticker on it that says 915, so we know it must be right. I mean, China wouldn't do that. They wouldn't just lie, right? But this is a 915 Yagi antenna, which when I first got it, I did go out and do a sweep with it and never picked anything up, but that was before people were really starting out there meshing with Meshtastic, so I do want to play with this again. But the point I wanted to make on this is 915 megahertz, the antenna length for that is small enough that home brewing our own antennas absolutely should be an option. Whether we're talking about coax dipoles or Yagis or what, in-fed half-wave. I mean, we're talking about a couple of inches. So, big collinears ought to be an option. Yagis, however, whatever we want to try, the little helical things. I think there's all kinds of room for experimentation there. And the little 2-inch antennas that come with the things, you take a pair of pliers, you can pop that rubber cap off, and what's going to be in there is a connector and a little piece of wire and a little coil. You can cut that piece of wire off, and now you've got a perfectly good connector for building whatever antenna you want. You probably do want to use a nano VNA and make sure you keep the thing tuned to around that 915 megahertz. And if you buy any no-name antennas off the internet, you probably want to pop it on a nano VNA and make sure it's actually tuned for 915. I know a couple of the ones I bought were not. They were Wi-Fi antennas that were labeled for 915. So just to be aware of. That's all I got. Meshtastic.org has all the documentation. That's the best place to go. I say experiment.
Let's keep talking, sharing our dreams with Maury Amateur Radio Club. It's better than it seems. Through wires and waves, we'll always stay tight in this world.